Good afternoon and welcome to the Henley Boat Races 2018. We are at Dorney Lake on this wintry, cold and windy day to celebrate the best of lightweight rowing at Oxford and Cambridge. My name is Giovanni Bergam-Andres and I'm joined by Joanna Brown, who will be together commentating on between the races today.
We'd like to just say a huge thank you to Deep Dive for sponsoring this live stream, because without them it wouldn't be possible. Today will be a celebration of Oxford and Cambridge lightweight rowing programmes. We will see the 35th lightweight women's boat race and 45th lightweight men's boat race. And for the first time today will include a formal race of the reserves for all four clubs. We'd like to show you a short video about Henley boat races. Nanda and Bruce are joining us, two of the members of the HBR Executive Committee, to tell us a little bit more about their role within the committee. Handing over to you.
Thank you. So when the open weight women became sponsored by Newton and moved to the Tideway, all the four lightweight clubs got together and essentially to take ownership of the Henley boat races and formed the executive committee, on which Bruce also sits, representing Cambridge men.
Indeed. Hi, yeah, I help run Cambridge University Lightweight Men and now also Cambridge University Lightweight Women and sit on the HBROC helping run this and helping ensure we get the streaming up and running so everybody can watch on a day like today. But equally, there's a lot of people. It's Tim walking past, race organiser. A lot of people involved. A lot of people who probably aren't actually here today because they've had to stay away because of the weather. Huge team. Umpires, safety coaches, the people involved in the streaming. We meet every couple of months,
every 3 months or so,
often in equally cold conditions in various boat houses to try and get things organised. Have some lively debates about how the races should run, what we want to do in the future. But yeah, and it's days like this, even though it's a bit tough, that I think makes it all worthwhile.
And Bruce and Nanda, what do you think makes the event so special?
Yeah. Well, it's the boat race. And what makes the boat race so special? For these guys, the lightweights, they train really the same sort of program as the open weights who train on the Tideway. For them, it's the same excitement, the same intensity of trying to beat their rivals at the other university. And so what is it that makes them practically give up all their social life to row? I think really you can only work and row, not much else, if you're going to do this seriously at Oxford or Cambridge. There's all the athletes, the larger squads, the coaches, all the support staff who get involved and put an awful lot of time and effort into it, more than they're remunerated for. And I think it's the sort of collective effort to beat the opposition every year, which sort of gets everyone feeling so sort of excited, and as we are today.
Yes.
Yeah, look, I think having done this, so I rowed in 1995, 6, 7 and 8. And it becomes your whole life. Gio, I know you've done it. I suspect, Joe, you have too. And you spend all of your energy, your time. Sometimes, unfortunately, your academics go out the window. You put everything you can into this. You often don't realise how many people are behind the scenes, but we try and make sure that happens. But I think as you leave that process and stay involved, after a while, what you realise is It is about giving those students an opportunity to do something different. The competition, I challenge pretty much anybody who's done it and been through it to come away saying they didn't learn something. Even if you lost, maybe you didn't even enjoy it. But I think you will always learn something, and it's something I don't think that can really be easily taught, certainly not in a classroom. So I think that's what it's all about.
All right, thank you very much. So,
Thank you both for joining us.
Pleasure.
Good luck, guys.
now, so let's go and talk a bit about the history. Like, where are we? What is this event? If you don't know about it, well, the lightweight boat races between Oxford and Cambridge began in 1975 when Richard Bates, an undergraduate at St John's College, Cambridge, saw the boat race and decided there needed to be the equivalent for the lightweights, and thus created this event just to demonstrate the strength, the oarsmanship, and determination of the lightweight undergraduate population.
Now, Henley at that point was one of the most famous stretches of rowing water in the world, so it seemed the obvious place to choose to have a 2,000 metre side-by-side race. As you can probably tell, we're not at Henley today, we're at Dorney. That was due to the chief umpire Peter Knowles making the decision based on the forecast and predicted weather conditions that it wouldn't have been safe to row at Henley this afternoon. So we're here in Dorney, and I'm sure the crews are equally as excited to get on with racing.
Currently, Cambridge leads in both the men's and lightweight women's races. The men have 27 wins to Cambridge men 27 wins to Oxford's 18, whereas the women have 18 to Oxford's 16. Whilst
And today we're going to see what impact the results today's races have on those results. We've got 4 races coming up for you. The lightweight women's reserve race at 3:30, the lightweight men's reserve race at 3:10, the lightweight women's blue boat at 4:10, and the lightweight men's blue boat at 4:30 to end today's racing. In just a few minutes, we will be kicking off with the University Lightweight Women's Reserve Race. For the past 2 years, the event has been run as a pair, and Cambridge has won in both 2016 and 2017. This year is a little different. It's run as a coxed 4, so not only do they have a cox to steer them down the course, they also have 2 extra oars to contend with. So we'll see how those changes affect the results today. So let's introduce the crews.
So the Cambridge crews is as follows. At stroke, we have Louise Brett from Fitzwilliam College and the second year undergraduate in geography. 3 seats, Jessica Godden, Manual College and first year in natural sciences. 2 seats is Jamie Fox, Clare College and second year mathematician. Bow seat from Trinity College and a third year historian is Aurelia Dixon. Coxing this crew will be Tara Slade, a third year medic from Gonville and Keys. So overall, quite a young crew, fully undergraduates, and that's quite exciting because we hopefully have many years to come with these athletes. Interesting to see what happens.
So on to the Oxford Women's Reserves. In the stroke seat, we have Emily Hinton, St Hugh's College and a DPhil student in psychiatry. Naomi Holland in the 3 seat, Christchurch College, a DPhil in physics. Amanda Thomas in the 2 seat, Somerville College, MPhil in linguistics. And Catherine Ferris in the bow seat, Trinity College, undergraduate in biochemistry. And coxing the crew is Jolette Mimpen from Green Templeton, another DPhil student, this time in musculoskeletal sciences. So a very mature crew for the Oxford Women's Reserves, I think you'd agree, Gio. And it'll be interesting to see how that could be affecting their nerves on the start line. We recently saw the women move up to the start line, and I believe they're starting to position themselves up there.
Before we head over to our commentator for the day, Robert Trehardt Jones, here's a quick message to all the crews from our sponsor of this live stream, Deep Dive.
Broken beat, dark into the heat. Oh, oh, oh,
Every race there is the number one, also the number two. In rowing and also in life, the first race is actually against yourself. We don't believe in luck. So I'm not going to say good luck to you all. What I am going to say is have a good row.
In schedule, so we're just going to talk a little bit more about the differences being at Dorney. So Gio here has rowed 3 boat races in 2014, 2016 and 2017. He's been successful and victorious in all 3. So Gio, how do you think the athletes would have been affected by knowing the change of location so quickly, so soon to their race? They only found out on Wednesday that they were moving.
So from my experience, you'd be already quite prepared in the sense that you know it's a 2K race. So in terms of the water, you'll bubble, nothing really changes, water going in and out. And then also you train for these things. So way before, the backup has always been Dorney, and because the backup's always been Dorney, is a place that you should always be aware that you would eventually come here. And there's precedent. We're talking about 2013 was the last time they happened.
Absolutely, and in 2013 the dark blue lightweights won by a cumulative total of over 6 lengths to both the men and the women. So I'm sure that the Oxford squads are determined that today is going to have the same effect. It was a double loss for Oxford last year in the lightweight men and the lightweight women's blue boats. So I'm sure they're going to come back and hope the same effect as 2013 happens again. From a coxing perspective, this is a slightly different race. It's a buoyed course this time, so it's a lot easier from a coxing perspective. You don't have to worry about competing for the best line, competing for the best stream. It makes the umpire's job a lot easier. We were catching up with Peter Knowles on Friday and he was saying about how today should be a lot easier, but as always, Oxford and Cambridge races can throw things up that we weren't quite expecting. So we are just being told that they are ready at the start line, so we're going to hand over to our commentator,
Robert Treadhard-Jones.
from Leander Club, who is going to be commentating for us this afternoon. I hope you enjoy the race.
Gio and Joe, and you join us on the start here for the women's lightweight reserve race, and as you can see there, the crew's having a little bit of difficulty in this crosswind. You'll be aware, of course, that for those of you who visited Dorney for the many of the major events that it's hosted over the last 15 years of its existence, the course runs roughly east-west, so that means that the very cold northerly wind which has plagued the UK for the last 48 hours or so is causing quite a cross breeze there, and you can see there the Oxford crew using their bowside blades to just straighten up the bow because it's desperately keen that the crews are started level. But the umpire Peter Knowles, in the briefing that took place with the crews just 3/4 of an hour or so ago, was at pains to point out that it's entirely possible that if the crews can't get level, but they will be pointed at a slight angle, that he will take the judgment call and might well give the go, even though they're not pointing straight down the course. So obviously the coxes will then have to compensate for that slight angle within the first few strokes. Well, I've been involved with the Henley boat races for a great many years, and we've seen some interesting and varied weather conditions over the years. Sometimes on Henley Reach it's a glorious spring afternoon, but this here at Dorney, the direct opposite. And it's just a hardened band of supporters who've come down to Dorney to witness the afternoon's programme. As you can see in shot there, not too many of those have ventured up to the 2,000 metre start, as Cambridge now back their boat back onto the start pontoons. And once again, you can just see that as now they've got attached, just taking their tops off, ready to race. And the umpire has also said that although the crews have to be attached to those start pontoons 5 minutes before race time, once they are all ready, then the umpire may well start the race before the official race time, because the last thing he wants is for these athletes to be hanging about in these freezing conditions. The ambient temperature here, it's hovering about 0 or plus 0.5, but the wind chill, because of that northerly breeze, really does make it feel bitingly cold here at Dorney, and a far cry from the fantastic conditions we enjoyed on this lake just 6 years ago, because of course it was the Dorney Lake that hosted the rowing events at the London Olympics. Massive crowds on that occasion. I think it was 35,000 people, rather less so today, as the two women's lightweight reserve crews get tapping it along once again. You see both trying to get their bows pointing straight down the course. The number 2 athlete there in the Cambridge crew, Jamie Fox from St Paul's Girls' School, just tapping it around using bow's blade to get the craft pointing straight down the course. As you can see, we're just a couple of minutes late because the crews are being given leeway to get their boat straight, but I'm sure we'll see this race get underway very shortly. So I'll give you the full crew lineup once again. Cambridge, the crew nearest to your camera, they're lying down, both bow loaders. The Cox is lying under the front canvas of each boat. Tara Slade there to the right with the distinctive Cambridge blue cap, and then down the boat Aurelia Dixon in the bow seat, Jamie Fox at 2, Jessica Gordon at 3, and Louise Brett in the stroke seat. And it looks as though the umpire is now calling them, because you can see they've all come forward ready to take that vital first stroke. Over on the far side, the Oxford crew, Jolette Mimpen, the Dutch student, in the Cox's seat. Then at bow, Catherine Ferris, followed by Amanda Thomas, Naomi Holland and Emily Hinson. Slight pause once again. I suspect that the umpire is going to take a judgment call. You can see that the 2 athlete in the Cambridge boat, Jamie's got her hand up to indicate that the crew is not quite ready. There's the starter, you can just see left of shot with his megaphone, and we are about to get underway. The women's lightweight reserve race. Oxford nearest over on the far side, and Cambridge nearest the camera, and we are underway for the first race of the afternoon. Good clean start by both fours here. I think it's Cambridge to show as we now move around. We are now on board the umpire's launch following the race, and you can see that Cambridge on the right with that slight advantage through the early stages of the race. Well, we've talked a lot about the shift in venue from Henley down to Dorney Reach. One of the significant facts is the way in which the river at Henley runs due north-south, so what we've got is a northerly wind against a fast-flowing stream, and that's led to incredibly lumpy conditions on Henley Reach and unrowable for this major event. We've still got a northerly wind, but because of the angulation of the course, the conditions are nothing like as lumpy, and things are beginning to even out now. But after that sluggish start, you can see that Oxford on the left of your picture really getting into their stride. We're just 1 minute in, and the crew's settling down to their race rate. I'll just get some rates for you then. So Oxford on the left of your picture now at 34 strokes a minute. Cambridge on the right. Ooh, there's a little bit of a struggle there. They're still up at 37, but you can see the blade work from Cambridge not as neat and tidy, and that means that their boat speed is suffering. But really good teamwork on the Oxford on the left, really pounding it down the course, and they are eking it out stroke by stroke. Well, both these squads, both lightweight squads, back in September, there were some 25, 26 athletes at each university reported for training. desperately keen to get into the blue boat itself. Those numbers were whittled away as the season progressed, as the selections took place. And then in the early part of the year, they were down to the last 12. And these are the 4 athletes for each university who just missed a place in the blue boat itself and a chance to take part in the lightweight women's boat race. All 8 athletes relatively inexperienced, but as you heard Joe describe a little earlier, the Oxford boat, senior at least in years, if not in racing experience, and they're certainly using that to a good effect as we now move down, approaching the halfway mark. You can see the 1,000-metre board just above the Cambridge crew's head there as we now move down to approach the halfway mark. And Cambridge are really going to have to find something special in the second half if they're going to come back into contention. But the blade work from Oxford looking very neat and tidy indeed. You can see the entry there absolutely together, and that's what counts in rowing. It's not just perfect blade work, it's the power of the stroke through the water, it's the length of that stroke in the water multiplied by the rate. So rate isn't everything, because of course when crews really increase the rate beyond what they're capable of, what can sometimes happen is that the work can fall off. But Oxford making a very good show of it indeed now. Cambridge there, they've got their act back together. This is good. Louise Brett, the Cambridge stroke, setting a nice even rhythm, and you can see how the 3 athletes behind her following absolutely. So that scrappy blade work that we saw through the first 300 metres, they're beginning to get their act back together again. Now, can they make up lost ground? They're just coming down to the halfway mark. Their cox, Tara Slade, will be able to give them the call. She'll be able to have a clear idea of just what that deficit is as we take the long view now, using the long camera down from the finish line, and you can see way up there in the distance, 1,000 metres away, you can see Oxford on the right, Peter Knowles in the umpire's launch following on, and this is the great place to be in rowing, because you're facing backwards. Once you're ahead, you can see exactly where the opposition is, and should there be any late surge, then you can try and match that sort of performance and try and eke out a further advantage. But Oxford Women's Reserves looking very strong and confident indeed, and they're able to relax, certain in the knowledge that they're hanging on to this significant lead as the third quarter opens up. What we tend to see in 2K racing is once we're through the 1,000-metre mark, the leading crew will try and dig in and work out a further advantage ahead of the tail enders. Whereas, of course, if you're second at that point, you really need to know that you've got to use that second 1,000 metres to try and redeem yourself and get right back into contention. You can see the frozen wastelands up there around the start. The snow still lying thick on the ground. I don't see that's going to disappear for another day or two if the weather forecast is anything to go by. But I think we're 5.5 minutes in, as you can see on the running time there, and I can't see Oxford letting this one go. So Emily Hinson, the stroke there, the psychiatric student from Coventry, setting the pace, still at 34. They've been at that rate for the last 1,200 metres or so. And there's Cambridge still looking a nice, strong, even rhythm. I suspect that if they'd been able to hit that sort of rhythm off the start when they looked so scrappy through the first 300 metres, then they'd be a lot more in contention that this race has otherwise reflected. But this is good work. They're not letting the panic set in. When you're down by this sort of significant margin, you need just to settle, work, strong, even. And we'll see the margin, and we'll just see if they are somehow getting back into contention. But very little time left to do it here in these women's lightweight reserve fours. We're just about 300 metres to go now on this 2,000 metre course, and way down in the distance there you can see the Eton Dorney facility. this Dorney Lake, which has hosted so many events on and off the water over the last 15 years of its existence. And little bit of a finishing flourish here from Oxford. They did all the work that was necessary in the early stages. You can see one of the Oxford 8s there in the back of the shot as their crew warm up for the racing later in this afternoon's programme. Slow times here over 2K, but don't forget this is 4s racing, so once we get into the 8s, once we get into the lightweight men's and women's boat race, we're going to be seeing times around the 6.5 minute mark, I dare say. But into the last few strokes then, and Oxford can afford to ease up. As I said, they did all the work that was necessary in the early part of the race, and they're about to be called across the line. We're coming up to the finish here, and it's going to be a very fine win indeed by a substantial margin there for Oxford, for Emily Hinson, Naomi Holland, Amanda Thomas and Catherine Ferris, coxed by their Dutch steerswoman Jolette Mimpen there in the bow seat as they come down to cross the line there. And it was about 8 minutes 14, but that's not the official time. We'll have the official time and indeed the official verdict, but with that substantial margin, I think the smart money is on an easily verdict here in this women's lightweight reserve 4s. So Cambridge now coming down to the line to cross the line in second place, and we'll be getting the official time and verdict in due course. But for their view over there from the finish, let's go back to Gio and Joanna.
The Oxford lightweight women's reserves have won their race by a considerable margin. Gio, what did you think of the race?
Well, I mean, with that margin, it'll be interesting to see how the consequent races of the women's lightweights.
Absolutely, and I think it's also worth highlighting that it is so difficult to keep your crew going. As I coxed the lightweight men's blue boat for Oxford in 2016, and it's incredibly hard to keep your crew going when the margin is of that distance. So I think, you know, huge credit to the Cambridge cox Tara for being able to keep her crew together and keep them moving as one during that really difficult period of time. Earlier on we had the weigh-in, so Gio's going to talk a little bit more about that.
So the lightweight boat races are quite similar to boxing in the sense there are weight categories. And what exactly is the lightweight weight category? We've got a few celebrations there. But the way it works for the men is that the average has to be 70 kilograms, and no single man may be above 72.5 kilograms.
For anyone wanting a conversion, that's 11 stone a man.
The weighing is done on the same day, 4 hours before the race, in the case of lightweight rowing, and you have a 1 hour window in which to do that weight. If you don't achieve that average crew weight in that time, your crew is disqualified. Meanwhile, for the women, the weight is 59 kilograms and there's no averaging, so everybody has to be below that weight.
And so joining us now is Anna Corduroy. Anna coxed the Oxford lightweight women's blue boat in 2016, so we were the two lightweight blue boat coxers. She then went on to cox Molesey's women's first eight, and since 2017 has coxed for GB. She went on to win gold in the World Championships in the Para Coxed 4 last summer, and we're very pleased to have her with us today. So thank you for joining us, Anna.
Thank you. Oh, thanks.
So what did you think of that race?
Very exciting. Really, really happy for Oxford. Yeah, it's quite nice to watch from the finish and see them come over the line, and they really deserved that one. So I'm pretty happy for them.
And how significant do you think the addition of these reserve races are to HBR as a whole, and what effect do you think they'll have on the lightweight clubs?
I think that it's a really positive development. I think it obviously says a lot about the depth that both Oxford and Cambridge are sort of finding within their lightweight squads, and obviously we've had reserve crews going for years now in different forms, and I think to actually have them be part of the event on the day is really, really exciting. And I think, like I said, I think they really, really deserve it. They've worked incredibly hard, and most people start with the reserve crews in some way or another, so it's nice to see that being recognised now.
I think that's highlighted as well. The Oxford women's lightweight blue boat this year has 2 of the reserves from last year in it. And what are you hoping to see from the rest of today's racing?
I'd love to see some close races. I think that would be quite exciting. Obviously, we're in Dorney this year, so it'd be quite nice to sort of see how steering obviously isn't part of it quite so much here. So it'd be quite nice to just see what kind of speed all of the crews can find over the rest of the day.
And on that note about the change of location, obviously hugely threw everyone off a little bit on Wednesday. What changes from a coxing perspective will the coxes have made with this change? Because obviously now we've got a buoyed course. What changes do you think they will have made?
So obviously all of these crews have been building their race profiles over a 2k distance all year. So in theory, changing to Dorney shouldn't make that much of a difference. Obviously, like I said, steering won't be much of a factor here. So they won't have to fight for the stream as they would at Henley. So in theory, I think there's a bit of a psychological challenge being here. Everybody knows the course at Henley. It's quite familiar, and we kind of split the course into sections, and each section feels a bit different. So obviously here it's a bit different. So bigger psychological challenge. I think the coxes are just going to have to keep driving their crews and make sure that they keep their heads in the boat.
And a huge temperature challenge as well. I'm sure well, obviously you can't feel at home, but I can tell you and really can assure you, it is bitterly cold here today. It really is freezing. And what were you able to take away from your experience coxing the Oxford lightweight women into your now international coxing career? What do you think you learnt from your time there?
So the Oxford lightweight women basically gave me an opportunity that I don't think I would have had anywhere else. They built me from the ground up, and I have to say thank you to Chris O'Hara and Jill Betts for obviously giving me that opportunity. I would never ever have got to where I have without them. They basically taught me how to work. They taught me how to cope under pressure, how to think on my feet during a race, work as part of a team. They basically, everything that I do on a daily basis comes from work that I did here, so I obviously owe them absolutely everything.
And I know you've guest coached a couple of times this season with the Oxford lightweight women's blue boat. So if you had to describe the crew that had boated just a few moments ago in 3 words, what would it be?
Oh my god, 3 words.
Not to put you on the spot at all.
Gritty, focused, and I'm trying to think of another word for determined. I mean, it's the same thing as gritty. Yeah.
Well, I think if those 3 words are anything to go by, it's going to be a good race. Thank you very much for joining us, and good luck with the rest of your season.
Thanks, Anne. So the next race coming up is the lightweight men's reserves race. This will be against Memphis, representing Oxford, and Granter for Cambridge. How does this naming convention work? Well, you might have noticed that at Oxbridge they quite like giving the reserves race a different name. So for the heavyweights, for example, it will be Golden versus Isis, and for us it's Memphis, as said, versus Granter. This race was reignited after a bit of a pause in 2016, and the current tally is 1-1. This is calculated as being a Cox 4 race that came from last year, where Oxford was 3/4 of the length down but managed to push through, and this time it will also be in fours.
So without further ado, I think we're going to head back to our commentator, Robert Jahan Jones. So over to him.
Thanks very much, Joe. Yes, welcome back to the 2,000 metre start for the lightweight men's reserve 4s. Granter for Cambridge, Nephthys for Oxford. Nephthys, in Greek mythology, sister of Isis, and of course Isis is the reserve crew for the men's heavyweights that we'll see racing on the Tideway in a week's time. There's the lineup for the Nephthys crew. So at bow we've got Andrew Linden, the South African from Brasenose College. At 2, Anton Paetz, who holds dual German and American nationality. Alex Allison in the 3 seat, and George Spill, the Oxford president, he is in the stroke seat. So once again we have a situation where we've got a non-rowing president, or a president who was not selected for the blue boat, and that can happen for a variety of reasons. Happens in lightweights, happens in heavyweights over the years, and sometimes it happens that the president has deselected himself because he's not up to the standard expected, or other factors come into play. But Spill stroking the Nephthys crew, and that lineup coxed by Holly Metcalf. Here's the lineup then for Granta. Granta, the Cambridge lightweight reserves. Granta also the Cambridge Student magazine, founded way back in the 19th century by a rowing man, Rudy Lehman, who went on, having competed for Cambridge in the boat race several times, then went on to race internationally for Leander Club and became one of the great coaches and facilitators in rowing. And it was also a great writer, so he went on to not only found Granta magazine, but write for Punch magazine. So a man of many parts indeed. And the Granta lineup there, Jonathan Shoesmith in the bow seat from Peterhouse College, Nick Rice, who holds dual British and South African nationality, hails from Cape Town, a Magdalen man, he's in the 2 seat. Hugo Ventum, Hong Kong, China and Great Britain, he's in the 3 seat. Hails from a hometown rather nearer to Dorney. He's just down the road in Hammersmith. Then we've got the Chester man, Tom Rowe, in the stroke seat, and that crew coxed by Kat Bourne, another Magdalen student, hometown Banbury, who Kat has done her fair share of coaching. She's doing, she did a music degree as an undergrad, now doing an MPhil in Arts and Creative Studies, but she's been a cox of quite some experience, and she spent recent season coaching at 2 notable rowing schools, both at Dulwich and also Westminster School on Putney Embankment. But here she is hoping to steer the Cambridge Lightweight Reserve men to victory here in the reserves race. Now, the Granta Nephthys encounter was a regular part of the Henley boat races in 8s, but it fell into abeyance a few years ago for a variety of reasons. And but here we are racing in 4s, and it would be great to see how whether this reserve race can really come back into its former glory days. But all that's for the future. There's the minor matter of today's race to get over, as all 8 athletes come to front stops ready to take that first important stroke. A little bit of a tapping up there going from Andrew Linden, the South African, in the bow seat of the Oxford boat. So we've got Oxford nearer the camera in lane 3, and on the far side in lane 2 we've got Granta, the Cambridge crew. You can see the water's a little bit popply, but you can take it from me that it's nothing like as lumpy as Henley Reach is right now. I was in Henley just an hour or so before racing began here at Dorney, and the organisers of the Henley boat races did indeed make the right decision. When the forecast was turning the wrong direction in the middle of the week, they made the big decision to change the venue. But it's a decision that organisers of the Henley boat races have had to make over the years. I can remember in 2001 we had to move up to Nottingham, believe it or not, at 3 days' notice because of the foot and mouth epidemic that caused significant problems on that occasion. Well, the race is now underway. A good clean start by both reserve 4s. Now, a camera on board the umpire's launch, having a little bit of problems with the focus there, but we're now back on track, thank goodness. And that has been a very good, clean, even start by both crews. But it's Cambridge on the left of your picture with that early edge, but the Oxford boat really now beginning to get some momentum as the 2 crews settle down into their race pace. I've got Cambridge still at 41, Oxford alongside them at the slightly lower rate of 39, beginning to dig deep. You can see the concentration on the faces of the 4 athletes in the Oxford boat as they really trying to get back up into contention and eat away that early lead. High stroke rates, very much the hallmark of lightweight rowing. And it's going to be very interesting to see whether these rates will fall significantly as the 2 4s get stuck into the middle of the race. Just as a reflection of the sort of high rates that get struck, I had the good fortune to be at the World Championships in Florida last season, where Ireland won the lightweight men's pairs. Mark O'Driscoll and and Mark O'Donovan and Shane O'Driscoll, and believe it or not, that pair never let their rate drop below 50 strokes a minute throughout the entire 2,000 metres. It was absolutely a fantastic effort and well deserving of the gold medal. Well, there aren't any gold medals on show here in the lightweight men's reserve fours, but Cambridge still hanging on. They've dropped their rate a little. But still hanging on to that slight advantage. Let's just get a rate on them. They're still clicking away at 36 strokes a minute. And Oxford certainly not out of the running by any means. They're at 35. And I think they've gone for a push. They haven't raised the rate, but Oxford really squeezing out those finishes. And Cambridge not off the hook by any means. We're just over 2 minutes into this lightweight reserve men's fours, and Oxford have come right back into it. And just look at this. We can see that the dark blues on the right have drawn level. Have they got their bow ball in front? Well, we saw a clear domination of the lightweight women's reserves just now by Oxford, but not in this case. It is far, far closer, and Cambridge have responded. Cambridge were not letting themselves be overhauled by Oxford. The stroke man in the Cambridge boat, Tom Rowe, he takes his men back up a pip. They're back up at 37. They're packing on the work, and they have once again drawn into that narrow lead. But there's less than half a length in it as we move past the 3-minute timing marker. The conditions here on the lake, you can see, still quite poppily, but not being troubled. As others have said earlier in the show, the windy conditions have not caused any particular problem with the lane markers. Of course, one of the slight quirkinesses of the Henley Reach course is that there's a bend halfway down the course on the regular Henley boat race course, but here on a 2,000 metre Olympic standard lake, absolutely straight lane marker, boys. There they are at several metre intervals all the way down, those yellow coloured buoys, and then they turn to red to mark the last 200 metres of the course. Cambridge still hanging on to that slight lead, but once again we see Oxford digging deep to try and get back in. 4 minutes gone. Oxford up the rate again to try and overhaul that narrow lead from Cambridge, but there's about a third of a length in it now as we move down, and you can see the finish tower over there on the right above the Oxford crew. But now Oxford getting a little bit of scrappy because Cambridge looking so solid and confident, and they have increased their lead once again. Oxford really beginning to wind it up now. Their president George Spill in the stroke seat calling his men on for further effort. Have they raised the rate? Let's just get a rating from them. No, they dropped it down to 33, but really trying to lengthen it out. Good clean catches, powerful drives through the water, but in fact it's not as long in the water as the Cambridge crew, and that means that the light blues have been able to eke out a further advantage and are beginning to move away. This is a critical point in this lightweight men's reserve fours. Can Oxford come back into contention? They put in a fantastic push after that first 500. I thought it was very impressive the way they were able to come right up alongside. But Spill has raised the rate yet again. He's taken it up a pip, and he really trying to move it on now. 5.5 minutes in through the 1,500 metre mark, just 500 metres remaining. And Spill, Allison Pate and Linden really gone for a big charge here. They know that they're fast running out of water. Let's see if we can get the umpire's launch shot in a minute, because I suspect that they are right back in contention. Yes, and Cambridge have had to raise the rate to push off that challenge. It's still Cambridge in the lead, but only by the narrowest possible margin. I've got Cambridge up at 36 strokes a minute. Behind them, Oxford tiring. Just look at the effort on the face. Alex Allison in the 3 seat. The pain really beginning to show. They're down at 33, so Cambridge overrating them by a couple of pips. but Oxford could still do it. And that small knot of spectators you can see over on the towpath there, really screaming and shouting, urging the crews on to greater efforts. And all four athletes in the Cambridge boat, well, they've worked hard, they've stayed in the advantage virtually from the word go. Can they hang on in there inside these last few desperate strokes? Let's just get the positions. Yes, oh, look at that. Oxford really winding it up now because we're coming way down into the closing stages, but I think it's going to be a case of too little too late as Oxford increase the rate yet again. Have they got anything left in the tank? Oh, just look at this. We are coming down to the line in the lightweight men's reserve fours. Cambridge still hanging on to that lead inside the last 50 metres or so, and it's Cambridge all the way to cross the line to win the lightweight men's reserve fours. About 7 minutes 20 there. We'll get the official time through in a minute. And Cambridge absolutely delighted with that win. Oh, that was a tensely fought struggle, but Cambridge eked out that advantage and have come home. Yes, their stroke man, Tom Rowe, absolutely delighted. So despite the best efforts of Oxford in that very close race, it was... Yeah, we've got confirmation then. The winning time was 7 minutes 24 there. So Cambridge win the reserve race. So for their view from beyond the finish line, let's get the very latest from Gio and Joanna.
And we've had the first win from Cambridge for the day. Joining us is going to be introduced by Gio.
So thanks. I mean, that was great commentary by Robert Jones again. But Bob, so what did you think of that race?
Well, it was a good race, wasn't it? Both crews were fighting hard all the way. I think the Cambridge crew stole a lead at the beginning, but Oxford hung on in there and put a big effort in at the end. I think it was a really good race for everybody. I think, you know, these are called reserved crews, but these guys have done all the training that the main crews have done. They're athletes in their own right, and just because they're in the reserve crew, that doesn't define them as athletes. These are truly outstanding athletes in their own right, so it's good to see them being given a chance to race. Congratulations to the organisers in relocating under difficult circumstances, but it's giving the athletes an opportunity to show us what they can do.
So I thought we could explore that bit you said about spares and things, because last year, for example, you were actually coaching the Cambridge University lightweight spares, and I was wondering how did you get the most out of them? You know, they've not made the first boat, they've got their own boat, and how do you empower them and give them the confidence in things?
Well, I picked them up after the decision on selection had been made, so they were naturally disappointed, but I pointed out to them that it was not the fact that they hadn't made the first eight that would define them as athletes, but it was how they would react to it. They had a race of their own to prepare for, and they had the opportunity to show what they could do in their own right, and then sort of said, let's refocus. And I tried to make it fun, take the tension out of the situation, get out on the water.
How do you make it fun?
How do you make it fun? That will take a long time to explain. I've been coaching for many, many years. There's all sorts of tricks of the trade, but you take the heat out of the situation and just introduce a little humour into the situation, put things into training that they can enjoy.
All right, and then I just wanted to know, so you were one of the founding members of CULRC at the start, and how do you feel the events evolved?
Oh, beyond all recognition. I mean, when the races started, we just begged and borrowed equipment. We didn't have two pennies to rub together. Where I think both universities now have got pretty professional about it. We have some decent funding. We're incredibly grateful for the sponsorship, and the whole level of endeavour has risen beyond all recognition. It's very exciting to see it having come so far.
It's great. Thank you very much, Bob.
My
for your
pleasure.
time. Thanks.
So we're on to the last two races of the day now, moving on to the blue boat races. So the first race of this section of the day will be the lightweight women's blue boat races. So we're just going to let CUWBC lightweights introduce themselves. So here introducing them is Ellie Thompson, their president for this year.
Good luck this weekend, Oxford, at the Henley boat races. I hope you enjoy this really special event, which has been so important not only in the history of lightweight rowing, but also Oxford rowing as a whole. It was only a few years ago that the open weight women were competing there as well, before it's become the festival of lightweight and college rowing that it is today. So even though OUWBC isn't there with you today, we're definitely there with you in spirit. We know how many hours you guys have worked for this all year and how driven and hard it's been, and I really hope you have a wonderful race and all the success. Good luck this weekend.
Good luck, Oxford!
They weren't available to get a video with earlier during the week. So at bow of the Oxford University Lightweight Women's Blue Boat is Grace Hanna, a second year mathematician from Exeter College. In the 2-seat, Fiona Jameson, a third-year DPhil student in plant science from Corpus Christi. In the 3-seat, Christina Turner, a fourth-year DPhil student in surgical science. It's Christina's third season trialling with OUW LRC and hoping to make her first appearance in the Blue Boat victorious. In the 4-seat is this year's president, Eleanor Watts, a third-year DPhil student in population health from Wolfson College. In the 5-seat, the only returning half-blue from last year's Blue Boat, Hannah Patel, a fourth-year DPhil student in biomedicine. In the 6th seat, Malene Malisk, a third-year DPhil student in international relations from St Anthony's College. In the 7th seat, Caitlin O'Brien, a third-year DPhil student in biomedical imaging from Jesus College. And in the stroke seat, Grace Joel, a second-year PPE undergraduate from Balliol College. And coxing this boat was So-On Lee, a third-year class assist from Somerville.
It's an interesting lineup we have from both boats there. Especially interesting will be the Cambridge crew, who for the first time ever have been coached by a team led by Dan Janes, also Stephen Harris. And it's Dan Janes was, of course, and this still is, the coach of the Cambridge lightweight men, and won for the last 4 races. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do with these guys.
Yeah. And what do you think, like, you've been coached by Dan for a number of years, what will he instill in his athletes?
Dan Janes instills a certain humility, I think, in his athletes in terms of their aims and things, but also that there is a certain degree of attrition in his system. You really have to devote yourself to what he wants and sort of really focus on the prize.
And so for the lightweight women's blue boat race, we've got probably one of the closest to and from victories passing between Oxford and Cambridge. We've got 16 wins for Oxford and 18 wins for Cambridge. So it's the race here today that's been bounced most evenly between the universities. Last year's win went to Cambridge with a 3-length verdict, with an incredibly polished and competitive crew, with several athletes having competed on the international stage. So it'll be interesting to see how Oxford have changed their programme and adapted to try and come back after that performance last year. We've got, never wanting to forget their roots, Oxford University Women's Boat Club. The open weight women who will be competing next Saturday have sent a message in to the Oxford women competing today. So we'd like to show you that message.
Good luck this weekend, Oxford, at the Henley boat races. I hope you enjoy this really special event, which has been so important not only in the history of lightweight rowing, but also Oxford rowing as a whole. It was only a few years ago that the open weight women were competing there as well, before it's become the festival of lightweight and college rowing that it is today. So even though OUWBC isn't there with you today, we're definitely there with you in spirit. We know how many hours you guys have worked for this all year and how driven and hard it's been, and I really hope you have a wonderful race and all the success. Good luck this weekend.
Good luck, Oxford!
Unfortunately, they're training on the Tideway today, but they wanted to send their luck to the crews. So we're shortly going to shortly going to be heading up to the start for the lightweight women's blue boat race. We've just seen the lightweight men boat and push off, so they're heading up to start their warm-up. And we're about to head up to the commentator and hand over to the camera on the launch.
Thanks very much, Joe. Yes, welcome to the final two races, the premier races of the afternoon here at Dorney Lake. First of all, the lightweight women's boat race. 34 years old, founded in 1984, introduced to the Henley boat race program to mirror the adoption of lightweight women being adopted into the international program at FISA, the World Rowing Federation. And the lightweight women's boat race, as we've heard, has been so keenly fought over the last 34 years. The scores so even, was 17-16 in favour of Cambridge. We thought we might have had a tie had it been a dark blue win last year in Henley, but it was once again Cambridge who took the edge, so the scores 18-16 in favour of Cambridge. Cambridge, who took the early dominance in this race through the 1980s and 90s, then Oxford came right back into it at the turn of the century, and the scores so even. Well, we've heard the two crews described. It's an all-British lineup in the Cambridge boat, but quite a cosmopolitan lineup in the Oxford boat, with So-On Lee in the cox's seat, the first Korean athlete ever to take part in the lightweight boat races, and sitting immediately in front of her, the Australian Grace Joel, hailing from Melbourne, the Balliol student studying PPE. So as we can see, both crews now trying to get level and straight in these breezy north wind conditions, and you can see the two crews making a very competent job. It's a tricky business, I can tell you, as a rower and as an umpire, trying to get eights, which are just over 20 meters long. They do blow around in crosswinds, and trying to get them straight and then stay straight until the man says go and drops his red flag, that's absolutely critical. And I dare say that all the umpires on the circuit will have some interesting tales to tell of the regattas where they've been officiating, where crews with rather less experience than the two that we're seeing in shot at the moment are desperately trying to get their crews straight, and it takes a level head and some calm words to try and instill that sort of instruction into eights, especially the junior eights, as they get level at major regattas. These two crews now are level. All 16 athletes come forward ready to take that first stroke. We've got Oxford nearest us. You can see the Oxford cox So-On Lee with her hand raised to indicate that her crew is not ready. She's dropped her hand, so we are about to start. The lightweight women's boat race 2018 is now underway. Good, strong, even start. The two crews beginning to build that momentum. Just a few short stabbing strokes, then they really begin to lengthen out, and now we are maintaining full boat speed. Now, who is in the lead? It's Oxford, just by a whisker there on the right of your picture, but Cambridge well up in contention. The 16 blades for Oxford splashing in at 38 strokes a minute, but Cambridge desperately keen for their second win in a row, also at 38, and there's very little to choose in it as the two crews now get stuck into their race pace. We'll see them drop their rate. We're just 40 seconds in, and it's Oxford who are looking set to try and reverse the verdict from last year's three-length victory that went to Cambridge. The Cambridge stroke Naomi Pygott really driving her crew on at that slightly higher rate, trying to get back into contention to eke back that advantage that Grace Joel and the rest of her crew have begun to eke out, but very little to choose as we just go past the first minute of the lightweight women's boat race. So the two crews now settling down. I'll get some rates. We saw them in the high 30s through the first 300 metres or so, but you can't maintain that sort of rate over the full 2K. And Cambridge now pounding their boat along at 37, so they haven't dropped by much because they know that they've got their work cut out. Oxford, on the other hand, with that slight lead, they've been able to take the rate down to 34 strokes a minute. Now, what will Cambridge do at that higher rate? Will they be able to match the power and the length in the water to make that higher rate count? And the answer is yes. They are closing the gap, but Oxford have seen them coming, and Oxford have just raised the rate a little to try and fight off that challenge. We had Oxford at 33 just a couple of hundred metres back, but they've taken it back up now to 35. They couldn't afford to relax, and they once again exerted their dominance, and they've gone up by just over half a length ahead of Cambridge as we now head down rapidly towards the halfway mark. Well, Stephanie Payne, the Cambridge Cox, able to see clearly the course ahead of her, as is the Oxford Cox so on Lee, because these two lanes absolutely straight, absolutely, I suspect the umpire is rather less troubled by the course here at Dorney than he might have been at Henley, where the crews have the whole of the river to choose, because on the traditional course at Henley there are no lane marker buoys, and the crews can in theory go wherever they like so long as they don't interfere with each other. So they don't necessarily follow a straight course down the centre of the river, because each will be keenly aware of the different flow rates that happen across the river width at Henley. No such problems here. Dorney Lake, a full Olympic standard course, still water, 2,000 metres, 6 lanes. We're just using 2 of them on this occasion, and they are absolutely evenly matched in conditions, as are these crews, because Cambridge are not letting Oxford off the hook. This is a good, strong, mature performance by the Cambridge crew. Ellie Thompson there in the bow seat. You can just see her at the far end of the Cambridge lineup. She's the sole survivor from last year's winning lightweight women's blue boat, and is this year's president. She also has, she's a local girl. Her family live in the Henley area, and she's picked up considerable club experience around the area. She's raced for Henley Rowing Club. She's raced for Shiplake Vikings, the club that is based out of Shiplake College. And just look at this. The Cambridge crew have been working so hard that they are right back into it and have got their bows in front of Oxford. So Oxford took the early advantage, but against that determined push by Cambridge through the middle of the race, they are losing ground. Now, can they dig deep and come back into it? This is what really sorts out a class crew. When you're down like this, but you rebuild, you can't pause, you can't take a breather, but you can just rethink the race and say, right, this is the time to really push it out, maintain our rhythm, not get ragged, push out the finishes, length, power, synchronicity in the water. So although Cambridge have the edge, Oxford are not letting them off the hook. But this is a fantastic performance. I've got to give all credit to Cambridge, because they didn't let themselves be rattled by the early Oxford lead. Cambridge have been up at 37 strokes a minute, and they are making that higher rate work in their favour. Oxford haven't let their rate creep up. They're down at 35, but they're getting their act together once again. This is a cracking race, this lightweight women's boat race this year. We're not seeing the dominance that we saw from the light blues last year, so Oxford have learnt from that. They know that they've had to dig deep to try and reverse that decision. Could we be seeing another close one like we did in the men's reserves just 20 minutes or so ago? There you can see the stroke rate. So it's Cambridge who've had the upper hand, 2 pips a minute higher than Oxford for the last little while. But once again, we're seeing the lead eaten away, and Oxford working very hard indeed as we enter the closing stages of the lightweight women's boat race for 2018. Naomi Pygott in the stroke seat of the Cambridge boat, setting a fine rhythm, and her crew behind her responding magnificently, still holding on, and Oxford really got to dig deep. You can see them winding it up now. The dark blues taking it up yet again. For the first time since the start, they've taken the rate right up and are now at 38. Can they close that gap? But Cambridge determined to shut the door. We are inside the last 100 metres then of the lightweight women's boat race, and this is going to be so close, ladies and gentlemen. Just look at this. But Cambridge still maintaining the edge inside the last 50 metres, the last few desperate strokes, and I think it's going to be a second successive win for Cambridge, who are going to increase that margin yet again. They're going to go 3 races up in the series as they cross the line unofficially by just over half a length, and Lucy Harris there in the 4th seat, absolutely exhausted, sitting back in the boat, needs to get up, needs to breathe after that fantastic effort. Yes, you can see the slapping of the water, the triumphant gestures from Cambridge, and Oxford on this occasion, after that good effort to try, and they took the early lead, but when Cambridge went for the killer blow, they just couldn't come back into it, try as they might. Just half a length in it. So for their views, let's go back up to Gio and Joanna.
And that was probably the closest race of the day. I think the verdict went to Cambridge, but we're still kind of... I think everyone was a bit confused when they crossed the line, but from the cheers coming from the Cambridge boat, I think we can safely say it was a Cambridge win.
Lots of proud people. I think at Queen's College, where with Lucy Harris and Becky were asked. Cambridge have 27 wins to Oxford 16, and many of you might remember those Oxford 16, a lot of them came under the tutelage, the leadership of Andy Nelder, who later went to become the head coach at Oxford University's Women's Boat Club, and also spent several years as assistant coach at Oxford OUBC. So, as we mentioned, the coach now for the men's race on the Cambridge side will instead be Dan Janes, who has won every race consecutively since 2014, and will, of course, be desperate to make this a 5th win. Though I'm sure that Oxford are also equally determined to overcome the current streak.
So let's introduce the crews. Arguably one of the most competitive OUL blue boats in the recent years. In the bow seat we have Roman Gurn, former St Paul's rower and now at St Cross College. In the 2 seat, a returning half blue from 2016. He stroked the blue boat I was a part of, Alex Rowe Jones from Univ College, a 4th year physicist. In the 3 seat, Aggie Crumpton, a 3rd year chemist from Queen's. In the 4 seat, another returning half blue from last year's blue boat, Siraj Mahesh, a 5th year medic from St Peter's. In the 5th seat, Jonathan Martin, a 3rd year medic from Balliol. In the 6th seat, Ian McGurgan, a 1st year DPhil student in neuroscience from St Hilda's. In the 7th seat, another returning half blue from last year's blue boat, Alex Pavitt. At stroke, Dan Bowen, a returning half blue from 2014, a 1st year DPhil student in statistics. And coxing the crew, Davil, a 3rd year mathematician from St Edmund Hall. I think you'll agree that's pretty stiff competition when you've got 4 returning half blues.
We'll see. There is a hell of a lot of experience in the Cambridge boat as well. And introducing the Cambridge boat, we have a short video from Zenas van Veldhoven, the president of CULRC, introducing his crew.
Okay, I've just been told that we don't have that video, unfortunately, but we're going to be trying to get hold of it very shortly. Whilst we're trying to get hold of that, we've got an interview with Doug and Caroline. Doug stroked the OUL blue boat last year and Caroline coxed the OUL blue boat last year. So guys, just give us a little...
Coming close, guys.
Coming close,
it's
get cozy.
quite a huddle, get warm.
So Give us an idea of what you thought of that last race. Very close racing coming down towards the end.
I mean, we from here really couldn't see it. We had actually no real way of knowing who had won it other than Cambridge celebrating quite frantically. Like, they don't come much closer than that.
Yeah, we couldn't see a lot, obviously from this angle, but it became clear from the celebrations that Cambridge seemed to have won it.
And so, from your experience of last year trialling and racing at Henley Boat Races, what did you take away from it, and did you learn anything from the experience that surprised yourselves?
I think the real thing you take away is that being at one of Oxford or Cambridge, it's natural to have a big rivalry with the other one. You don't really properly experience the extent of that until you've gone and raced it yourself. And only then do you really understand what it's all about, and do you really have an appreciation for how much it means to all the guys and girls rowing today, and like how much of a deal it is.
Yeah, I think similar thing with the rivalries, but also you realise that the people in the other boat are probably the most similar people to you in the country. They're kind of your exact opposites, but yeah, the rivalry is quite strong.
Now, what we didn't say at the beginning of this interview is that the two men standing next to me were actually opposite men last year. So they were kind of facing off last year at this point. So the guys are just warming up now. They've been pushed off by their coach Sam Wells. So you two are probably one of the few people who we can ask this question to, as it's Sam's only his second season. What will he have said to the guys before they pushed off? What advice will he have given them? So from Caroline.
Probably very little, just as they pushed off. Don't want to distract them, but yeah, he'd probably make sure that they knew they had their confidence, but trusted in the race plan and knew what they're doing. They'll have had a talk just before they came outside, really, especially given it's so cold today.
Yeah, Sam's not a man of many words. He won't have said too much, but his whole ethos is he's not a big fan of getting people too aggressive and too pumped before a race. You have to be more excited for it, if that makes sense. So he'll have been all about letting them chill out this morning and just getting their heads in the right place and not getting them too hyped too early, and just making sure they're focused and ready to do it.
And on the start line last year, what was going through your heads?
Well, personally, you get very nervous in the few weeks, months, days before the boat race, but a few minutes before you start, like, it all kind of drops and you actually just want it to start. You're sick of waiting, like, you're so adrenaline fueled and you're ready to go, you just want to go. So they'll just be, the longer it takes for it to start, the worse for everyone. They'll just want to get going with it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was actually surprisingly calm, which I think is probably testament to Sam's planning and everything, and keeping us really calm, which is not at all what I expected. But yeah, I was definitely ready for it by that point.
And so you know some of the guys in the boat this year. If you had to describe the lightweight men's blue boat from Oxford this year in 3 words, what would they be?
You can't answer something like that.
Not to put you on the spot at all, guys.
Definitely determined. I reckon the returners are really going to want it. I know Siraj and Alex, because I raced with both of them last year. I know they've come back this year because they really, really want to win it.
So you've got determined.
Yeah, well, on that, motivated, similar sort of word. Confident. We have every year, and it hasn't gone so well for Oxford in the last couple, but you've got to believe that you can do it, even if it doesn't always happen. You have to fully believe that you can do it, and not expect to do it, but have the belief that you can if you do it right. So they'll be confident for it.
Thank you both so much for joining us, and I hope you get a dark blue result for the first time in too many years. Thank you very much. Enjoy watching the races. So on that note, Gio, what was going through your head on the start line? You know, you had 3 experiences on the start line. What were you always thinking about at that point? Did it change after you'd had the first one?
I think it resonated what the guys just said there about just really being focused with those actions that you have to do for the next 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And nerves don't really come into it. At the same time, I like to be passionate in the sport, the things I do, and there's a lot of passion and energy in trying to beat that opposition, but you can't let that take you and influence you.
Hang on, we've just...
Anyway.
Tom, can we have a quick word? Okay, so we just got one of the winning Cambridge spares from the spare boat here. How was that race? Talk about close all the way up to the line. We were like, who's won?
Yeah, it was really close. I thought our push onto the net was really good, and I thought we had a really good rhythm. Well, I'll say that I'm stroked, so yeah. It was really good. It was closer. Yeah, I think it was closer than we perhaps thought it was going to be. But no, I thought it was really, we executed the plan really well, and it was kind of clean and clinical, which is what we were hoping to do. So yeah.
A nice close racing, which is exactly what we want to see. And fingers crossed, we're going to have another close race to come.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching the men actually.
Sorry to have just grabbed you, but thank you for coming and having a word with us. Congratulations on your win. Okay, so we're going to head up to our commentators up on the start line to see the last race of the day, the Oxford-Cambridge Lightweight Men's Blue Boats.
Thanks very much, Joe. Yes, welcome back to the 2,000 metre start for the final race of the day, the Lightweight Men's Blue Boat 2018. It was, of course, the lightweight men who started the Henley boat races way back in 1975. It was the idea of St John's undergraduate Richard Bate to hold a lightweight men's boat race, reflecting the adoption of the lightweight men's racing status at international level. And the lightweight men were joined by the open weight women just a few years later, and then of course, as we heard earlier, by the lightweight women, and that generated the full Henley boat race program that held sway for so very many years until finally the open weight women achieved their ambition of moving down to join the men on the tideway between Putney and Mortlake just a few 3 years ago. Here we see the Cambridge crew have yet to get attached, so I think there's been some delay on the start. We'll get the latest from that. Can't quite understand the reasons, because as I mentioned earlier, in theory the crews are supposed to be attached to the start pontoon 5 minutes before race time, and we are now 1 minute before race time, and for whatever reason Cambridge are not only not attached but are some way off, so something very peculiar. You can just see the Oxford crew moving into shot on the right there. So that gives me the chance to name the two crews. Oxford just spinning there, a clear view of their cox, de Valdesai, the mathematician from St Edmund Hall, steered the Oxford Lightweight Reserves last year. We've got several athletes, as Joe and Gio were saying a few moments ago, several who raced last year. Two from the losing Oxford crew, Suraj Mahesh in the 4 seat and Alex Pavitt in the 7 seat. But we've got 3 returning winners from Cambridge, including their president, Zenas van Veldhoven, the Belgian student in the 3 seat, as well as the Stern pair, Benedict Mackworth and Sam Philpott. And in fact, Mackworth and Philpott won also in 2016, so they are looking for a hat-trick of wins as individuals. And Cambridge, in fact, looking for their 4th successive win overall in the race. Cambridge, who certainly have dominated the lightweight men's boat race over the last 33 years, so the score currently stands at 27-16 in Cambridge's favour. We were hearing from Bob Greatrix. He was being interviewed by Gio and Joe before the last race down there at their finish position, and Bob and several other men who've played a great part in bringing on the lightweight crews at Cambridge through those early years, and were largely responsible for the light blue success that gave them that advantage, which they still hold on to in the series. So the crews, once attached, now removing their tops. So once they've done that, they'll be keen to get underway, because what little warmth there was in the air is now beginning to disappear as the afternoon wears on, and we're going to have another hard frost, I suspect, tonight, before the temperatures beginning to lift tomorrow, and we'll see that snow lying on the ground beginning to melt away. But it really is not a great day to be out on the river. It's about as far from balmy summer breezes as you can get here on the Dorney Lake, as Oxford back their boat down onto the start pontoon, and you'll see the the man lying down there on the pontoon, just taking up his position, and he'll take hold of the stern end of the boat. But first of all, once the athletes remove their tops, they'll be passed to the pontoon, and then somebody will bag them up, and then they'll be taken down the course to be ready for the athletes to put back on once they finish the race in 10 minutes' time. Well, I don't quite know why Oxford have decided to leave the start. Most peculiar. Because when the umpire gave his briefing before the start of the afternoon programme, he was absolutely adamant that no one crew should leave the other hanging about. He wanted to see both crews get attached as quickly as possible, and then once they were both ready to race, then he would get them underway as practically as possible, so that nobody was left getting unduly cold in these challenging conditions. So we see the stroke, the Oxford stroke Dan Bowen there, sitting immediately in front of Davil Desai, the Cox. Key communication between Cox and stroke in eights. Obviously the stroke is the man who determines the rate of the boat. The Cox carries the race plan in his head, and so communication between those two men throughout the race, absolutely critical. Behind stroke you've got the 7-man who determines the rate and rhythm up the bow side. Then you've got the engine room, what in an open weight crew will be the larger athletes in the center of the boat, 6, 5, 4 and 3, and then the two athletes in the bow pair, bow and 2, they tend to be the technical experts, because they've got to cope with the fact that the bow of the boat can rise and fall by as much as 4 or 5 inches during each stroke. So they need to be able to deal with the fact that the height of the water that they're dealing with is at a different level relatively to what the stern end of the boat are doing. But all of these athletes will have weighed in before the race inside that critical margin of 72.5 athletes with 72.5 kilos, with a crew average of less than 70 kilos, which is almost exactly 11 stone. And all 16 athletes now at front stops, knees bent, sliding their seats forward, ready to take that first all-important stroke. Last few little bits of adjustment from all 16, making sure their grip is correct. Few little nervous scratchings of the head going on. Both Cox's hands are now up. Juliet Armstrong for Cambridge on the far side. Davil Desai has lowered, his hand is back up, indicating that he feels his boat is not quite straight. He's asking for his bow athlete, Roman Guerin, just to give it a little bit of a tap, just to straighten it up. And you can see over on the far side, behind that yellow marker, that's the aligner. He's holding out a white flag to indicate to the umpire that the bow balls are level and that the two crews are, in theory, ready to race. The lightweight men's boat race 2018 is about to start, and we are going to see some high rates of striking, the absolute hallmark of lightweight eights. And the two crews now really getting into their stride through those first all-important 10 strokes, and it's Oxford who've taken the early lead, and they have taken an absolute flyer. This is fantastic stuff from the Oxford boat. Now, how long can they maintain this incredible rate? Pounding along, there they go, and I've got them now at 41 strokes a minute, so well into the low 40s, not unusual for lightweight eights, and in fact Cambridge are a couple of pips higher, but Oxford have made that slightly lower rate work in their favour. one of the great challenges in lightweight rowing, because all the athletes know that they weigh exactly the same. There's no advantage in terms of the athlete mass, so it's technical proficiency that's what really counts, because they're evenly matched in weight. But just look at that, Cambridge squeezing it on. They're making the higher rate work in their favour. So after that absolute flyer that Oxford took through the first 50 seconds or so of this lightweight men's boat race, Cambridge really beginning to wind it up, and Sam Philpott in the stroke seat, the York resident from Girton College, leading his men at that higher rate, and they have gone for a sustained attack that has seen them draw half a length clear, and Cambridge really looking as though they might, if they can maintain this sort of momentum, go for that vital fourth successive win in the lightweight men's boat race. Juliet Armstrong in the cox's seat, urging her crew on to greater efforts. Juliet, who from Nottingham, historian at Trinity College, she coxed the reserve crew to a win last year, so she's moved up a notch. Here she is in the lightweight men's blue boat, and in the all-important steersman's seat, and really urging her crew on. And the unit of 8 athletes directly in front of her, working very strongly indeed to maintain that edge. But Oxford are not letting them off the lead. Just look at that sheer guts and determination from the dark blues, and they've got back into their stride. They are not letting Cambridge off the hook here. Dan Bowen in the stroke seat, the Christchurch man, driving his crew on at they're at still a pip or so lower than Cambridge, but they're really packing on the work. And there's still less than a length in it as we move down now towards the halfway mark in the lightweight men's boat race. Cambridge, though, looking a very dynamic unit. Just look at that blade work, very high synchronicity, whereas the Oxford finish is getting a little bit scrappy. They're not quite as long in the water, so they really need to work at it if they're going to come back into contention. But even as I've been describing the scene, 3 minutes into this race, and the gap is getting narrower. What Oxford don't want to do is to let Cambridge slip away by more than a boat length, because once they break clear, once they've got clear water in that way, that's not just a physical advantage, it's also a psychological advantage. So long as Oxford can maintain that sort of contact, then they know that they're in with a shout. But just look at this. They really have pushed on so hard, trying to reduce that margin, but Oxford are still down, and you can see that their heads are up. They know that they've still got it in them, because they haven't yet. We're 4 minutes in now, and there's still time for Oxford to reverse this verdict here in the lightweight men's boat race, but they're going to have to pull out something very special, work very strongly as a unit. They've taken the rate up. Did you see that? They changed gear slightly. They've taken the rate up in another charge here, and this is great stuff from Oxford. They're up at 37 strokes a minute, continuing to close. Cambridge respond now. There's just over half a length in it. 4.5 minutes into this race, and this is going to be such a close race. We thought we'd see the close race in the women's race just 20 minutes ago, but I think this is going to be a real humdinger as the Oxford momentum is maintained now. As we move through, we're approaching the 1500 metres gone signal, and the dark blues driven on by Dan Bowen, Alex Pavitt behind him, Ian McGurgan, the Irish athlete from Sligo, in the 6th seat, Jonathan Martin at 5, the man, he's the Balliol president, and Jonathan Martin, his dad Rob, won this race in 1981, 37 years ago, and it would be a proud dad indeed if he was to see his son reverse this decision here as Cambridge continue to maintain the narrowest possible margin here. But can Oxford come back into it? The margin is so tight, and the desperation that's coming in, but all credit to both crews. The blade work is still neat, it's still synchronous, they're absolutely together, and Cambridge really pushing it on. They know that they're really having to wind it up now. I've got Cambridge at 39 because they can see the finish in sight here. We're just over 6 minutes gone, and it's still Cambridge. The pace in this race is so tight. Just look at this. They are inside the last 150 metres of the lightweight men's boat race, and Cambridge are maintaining the edge. But the Oxford momentum is continuing to increase, but it's Cambridge by about a third of a length as they come down to the line. Oh, Cambridge are going to take it. There they go, across the line. Unofficially a third of a length. Oxford absolutely gave their all, collapsing there in the bottom of the boat. But the heads are up, the shouts of joy from Cambridge, and they have won the lightweight men's boat race. And there's going to be a happy man down at the finish. Gio, tell us your views from down there.
Here's Ellie Thompson, captain for the Cambridge Lightweight Women's Blue Boat this year. Ellie, congratulations on your win. How must that have felt?
Yeah, amazing. Beyond words, like, wow, yeah.
2 years in a row as well. First across the finish line and both of them in the bow seat. There was a bit of risky there for a minute because you were down for a bit and then you kind of came back through them. Were you confident in the crew that you were like, right, we're going to make the push when it was the call for it?
Yeah, I think we were always confident in our rhythm and knew that we were like working into it the whole time. I never felt like they were winning. I think we were just aware of where we were and never felt down. I think we always felt in control.
And obviously everyone, when they crossed the line, it was like, who's won? No one was really quite sure. We were only kind of sure when you started celebrating, which was great to see. And I hope you have a lovely celebration this evening. Congratulations again, and go and celebrate with the boys as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye. And we've just seen the lightweight men's blue boat finish as well, which was an incredibly tight race. What did you think of the race, Gio?
One of the most nerve-wracking races. So, next year 2015 was also one of the extraordinarily nerve-wracking. We knew the Oxford crew was going to be a phenomenal crew, a very good crew, one of their best in many years. And
I think it was rather reminiscent of the 2015 boat race, to be honest with you. And we're going to have a very quick interview. Perfect timing, Zoe, with
Hello,
Zoe
Zoe.
de Toledo. So I'm going to leave you with Gio.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi, Zoe. So, we just want to know, what do you think of that last race? What
Great
were your
racing.
thoughts?
We were watching the live feed, but it turned out we were about 20 seconds behind because our phone was buffering too much. So then we suddenly realised they were coming right towards us. But amazing, both that race and the lightweight women's 8. Really close racing. Great to see, competitive racing here. So really good stuff.
So we just wanted to think about, with all your experience with boat races and such, like what did you learn about yourself in your own experience whilst doing all this trialing? Like, did you discover yourself? What surprised you as well?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I it probably took me until the end of my 2 years trialing really to learn was how to actually be on it every single day. I think that was a really difficult thing to do because the season is so short. You know, you can't have a day off. You've got to be on it every single day because you start training in September and then your race is done by sort of March or April. So yeah, you have to really use the time and you have to be quite intense in your training. So you really need to stay focused and just be on it every single day, which is not a usual thing to do. It's very difficult, especially when you're studying as well and you're a busy person.
So here, you know, we've just been talking about winners and the wonderful thing it is to win, but with every winner there comes a loser.
Yeah.
And what do you have any advice for those people? What will be going through their heads?
Yeah, I mean, I've won a boat race and I've lost a boat race, so I've had both experiences. I think that when you lose a race, you need to still look back on the experience and you need to take from the experience the positives, because at the end of the day, you've done all the training in exactly the same way as the other team, and you've worked just as hard, but the result didn't go your way on the day. So you've got to take that positive experience, and then you just need to have time to process it, really. And it's hard. I think it's easy for those outside it to say, oh, well, it's just sport, you know, who cares really who wins or loses, but it can really affect you. So I think you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to say, okay, this does affect me, you know, I need to kind of grieve in a way the loss, but then look back, take the positive experiences and take the good lessons from it, really.
Yeah. And then we've just got a few more questions from, you know, your experience with the GB squad and things. So what should someone, I'm sure many people here watching today will be people wanting to make the national squad or just further themselves in rowing. Have you got any advice for those people?
I think my best bit of advice is just keep at it. You know, if it's something you really want to do, then keep trying. I was saying last night, I was giving a talk last night and I was saying the only reason that I was successful was because I persevered when others didn't. I wasn't any better than anyone. When I started coxing, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I got lucky and had some good experiences. And then quite a few times I had setbacks and I didn't get into teams I wanted to, and I just came back again the following year. And that's the only reason, really, I think, why I got to where I got to, because there were many times when, looking back on it, I think, why didn't I give up then? Why did I carry on? But I decided it was what I wanted, so I just kept at it, basically. But I'd also say, especially in rowing, the nice thing about rowing is so many people do so well having only come to the sport late. So I would also say, you know, we have Olympic champions who didn't start rowing until after university. So of time, there's time to find the thing that really works for you, and there's time to find, if it's not rowing, the sport that, you know, is right for you.
And also for all those college rowers coming in, having never rowed, seeing people who have, it might be better, but actually they've also got as much of a chance.
Yeah, well,
as
Zoe
anyone.
Lee, who was the stroke seat of my my Rio crew, she learnt to row at Oxford, so she was a college rower, and then after a while she did the boat race, and then she made the transition into international rowing. So it's definitely doable.
Okay, so thank you very much.
No worries.
Zoe. It's good to have you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Zoe. So there we have it. Another Henley boat races has come to an end. Oxford leave with 1 win and Cambridge with 3. Once again, a huge thank you to our sponsors, and in particular Deep Dive for sponsoring this live stream. Thank you to all the officials, to the coaches, to the athletes, and to the supporters who've come out on a bitterly cold, dawny Sunday. And because without them, this event wouldn't be possible. Thank you to anyone at home who's watching us. Thank you, Gio, for presenting with me today.
Pleasure.
Thank you to all the people that we've interviewed, and we look forward to seeing you next year.
Goodbye.